The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. In the living room, a fire crackled gently in the hearth, its warmth barely reaching the far corners of the room. It was a peaceful evening, or so it seemed. "Darling, could you come here for a moment?" Sarah's voice echoed through the house, breaking the silence. She stood by the fireplace, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. Her eyes darted around the room, as if searching for something or someone. John, who had been lounging on the couch with a book, looked up from his page. "Sure, what's up?" he asked, setting the book aside and rising to his feet. He moved towards her, his brow furrowed in concern. Sarah took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling visibly. I need to talk to you about something important," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's about Maria." John's heart skipped a beat. Maria was their maid, a young woman who had been working for them for the past year. She was efficient, polite, and always willing to go the extra mile. But there was something else about her that John couldn't quite put his finger on, something that made him feel uneasy whenever she was around. "What about her?" John asked cautiously, his mind racing. Had Sarah found out about his secret meetings with Maria? No, that was impossible. They had been so careful. Sarah hesitated, her eyes locking onto his. "I saw something today," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something that, well, it made me realize that maybe we need to have a conversation about boundaries." John's stomach churned. This was it. She knew. But how? And what exactly had she seen? He forced himself to remain calm, to keep his expression neutral. "What did you see?" he asked, his voice steady. Sarah bit her lip, her eyes filling with tears. "I saw her," she whispered. "In your study. She was touching you, and you didn't pull away." John felt a surge of panic. His mind raced back to earlier that day, when Maria had come into his study to clean. He had been sitting at his desk, lost in thought. When she had approached him, she had leaned over, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, and whispered something in his ear. He hadn't pulled away then, too caught up in the moment to think clearly. "Sarah, it's not what you think," he said quickly, trying to reassure her. She was asking me about something. I didn't realize she was standing so close." Sarah shook her head, her tears spilling over. "No, John, you can't lie to me. I know what I saw, and I know how you've been acting lately. Distant, distracted, always making excuses to be alone with her." John's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to deny it, to tell her that she was wrong, but he knew it would be futile. She had seen enough to know the truth, and now, he had to face the consequences of his actions. "Sarah, please," he pleaded, taking a step towards her. "Let's sit down and talk about this. We can work through it together." But Sarah stepped back, her eyes filled with hurt and betrayal. "No, John, I don't want to talk right now. I need some time to think." With that, she turned and fled the room, leaving John standing alone by the fireplace. He watched her go, his heart heavy with guilt and regret. He had known this day might come, but he had never imagined it would happen like this. Now, he had to figure out how to fix things before it was too late. As he stood there, lost in thought, he heard a soft knock on the door. Turning, he saw Maria standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with concern. "Mr. Thompson, is everything all right?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I heard Mrs. Thompson crying." John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No, Maria, everything is not all right. Sarah knows about us." Maria's eyes widened in shock. "Oh no," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. What are we going to do? John shook his head, feeling a sense of helplessness wash over him. I don't know, he admitted, but we need to be careful. If Sarah finds out the full extent of our relationship, it could destroy everything. Maria nodded, her eyes filled with fear. Should I leave? Maybe it would be better if I wasn't here when she comes back. John considered her suggestion, but ultimately shook his head. No, Maria, you shouldn't have to leave because of my mistakes. We'll figure this out together. Maria looked relieved, but still uncertain. All right, she said softly, but what should we do now? John took a deep breath, trying to gather his thoughts. First, we need to give Sarah some space. She needs time to process what she saw. And second, we need to be more careful. No more private meetings. No more physical contact. We have to make sure she doesn't find out anything else. Maria nodded, her eyes filled with determination. Okay, Mr. Thompson, I'll do whatever it takes to help fix this. John reached out, placing a gentle hand on her arm. Thank you, Maria. I don't know what I'd do without you. Maria smiled weakly, her eyes meeting his. We'll get through this, Mr. Thompson, together. As they stood there, united in their resolve, John couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. He had put both of them in this situation, and now they were facing the consequences. But despite the challenges ahead, he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't lose either of them. Not now. Not ever. Sarah stood at the bottom of the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been pacing back and forth in the hallway for what felt like hours, trying to muster the courage to confront Maria directly. The house was eerily quiet, the only sound being the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the distance. Finally, she took a deep breath and made her way up the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She reached the top and turned down the hallway towards Maria's room. The door was slightly ajar, and Sarah could see the soft glow of a lamp inside. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the doorknob. This was it. There was no turning back now. With a determined push, she opened the door and stepped inside. Maria was sitting on the edge of her bed, her head bowed as if in prayer. She looked up when she heard the door creak open, her eyes widening in surprise. Mrs. Thompson? She stammered, clearly caught off guard. Is everything all right? Sarah closed the door behind her and crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes narrowing as she studied Maria. No, Maria, everything is not all right, she said firmly. I need to talk to you about something. Maria's face paled, and she swallowed hard. Of course, Mrs. Thompson, what is it? Sarah took a step closer, her gaze unwavering. I saw you today, Maria, in John's study. I saw the way you were touching him, the way he didn't pull away. I need to know the truth. Are you involved with my husband? Maria's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape or an excuse, but there was none. She knew she had been caught, and there was no denying it. Mrs. Thompson, please, it's not what you think, she began, her voice trembling. We were just talking, that's all. Sarah shook her head, her patience wearing thin. Don't lie to me, Maria. I know what I saw, and I deserve the truth. So tell me, are you sleeping with my husband? Maria's shoulders slumped, and she let out a small sob. Yes, she admitted softly, but it's not what you think. We never meant for this to happen. Sarah felt a wave of anger and betrayal wash over her, and she clenched her fists at her sides. How long has this been going on? She demanded, her voice rising. A few months, Maria replied, her voice barely above a whisper. We started spending more time together, and things just happened, but we never intended to hurt you, Mrs. Thompson. We care about each other. But we also care about you. Sarah scoffed, her eyes filling with tears. Care about me? You betrayed me. Both of you. How can you say that you care about me when you've been sneaking around behind my back? Maria looked up at Sarah, her own tears streaming down her face. Please, Mrs. Thompson, you have to understand. We didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. And now we're trying to figure out how to fix it. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Fix it? How do you plan to fix this, Maria? Do you honestly think there's any way to fix this? Maria hesitated, then nodded slowly. Yes, Mrs. Thompson, we can work through this. We can find a way to make things right. Please, give us a chance. Sarah stared at Maria, her mind racing. She wanted to believe that there was a way to fix this, but the pain and betrayal were still too fresh. I don't know if I can trust either of you, she said finally, but I need to think about this. I need some time. Maria nodded, her eyes filled with hope. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. We'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Sarah turned to leave, but before she reached the door, she paused and looked back at Maria. Just be careful, Maria. If I find out that you're lying to me again, there will be consequences. With that, she left the room, closing the door softly behind her. As she made her way back downstairs, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. She had confronted Maria, but the situation was far from resolved. Now, she had to decide what to do next.